Obish Dubish is everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. And this is yet another discussion about the Canon EF 75 to 300 f4 to 5.6. And I don't have this lens, so I can't show it to you. But it was on the Rebel XTi, which is a 10 megapixel camera. And I used this extensively combo through 2009 and 2010. And I think it has a bad reputation because people expect more from Canon. That's not to say Canon made some dogs in the past and probably currently, but was it a bad lens? No. I'm going to tell you a little bit about shooting with a 75 to 300 zoom. Is you're going to have to use a 400 ISO as a minimum on a bright sunny day, and the other light you're going to have to jack up your ISO. This camera could go up to 1600, but 1600 was a little funky. 800 was totally usable and excellent. 400 was the best, and so you would have to use a fast shutter speed, at least 1/320th of a second, and more would be ideal. Plus, you would have to stop down to at least f8, but if 9, 10, 11, and 16 would be better. And you would have to maintain a fast shutter speed with those stop-down apertures. And then you're going to find you'll get really good results. Autofocus. Canon has the best autofocus, I think, out of so many other brands I tried, but even it's still sucky. You know, sometimes it picks something that besides what you want. Maybe it's not 100% accurate. I've seen that in a lot of Canon lenses. Sometimes they have a bias, and it's hard to correct them. The more modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, they usually have a menu where it says, you know, adjust autofocus, where you can go plus or minus, and that's helpful. But these one, maybe there was a secret combination of pressing the buttons while you're booting up, and then you could get in some secret menu and adjust the autofocus. But I could never discover how this one would work. Oh, there's a thing called Magic Lantern that's supposed to open up all sorts of secret things in your camera. But the model I had, and there's so many of these different models, I'm confused myself. I had one made in Malaysia with the USM autofocus, and most of the time it boinked right in and you're pretty decent. But a lot of times, even if I took 3 pictures in a row, it wouldn't autofocus correctly for some reason. It got spoofed, especially at 300 millimeters. So when you're at 300 millimeters, you want to use 1/500th of a second or faster. You want to stop down to like f10, 11, or 16, and you'll get pretty decent results. I went to another balloon festival in August of 2010, and I took this lens with me, and I was very pleased with the way these photos came out. And remember, it's just 10 megapixel. 10 megapixel, I cropped them to 16:9, resized them to fit this movie format, and some of them I was able to do a 1920 by 1080 1:1 crop and place it right into the movie. So it'd be like an A and a B. I took one picture, received overall, and then like a close-up. On an occasion, I also did a 1:1 crop right off the bat, and then sometimes I even cropped even smaller, and then I upscaled it to fit the screen. Some of the photos, they were definitely blurry. I used a too slow shutter speed. I was using a wide aperture. It was definitely soft for whatever reason. And I did a line drawing filter on them, or I did a oil painting filter on them, so to be artsy-fartsy. So this was a good camera in its day. I got all these pictures in the can, and they're still usable even today when there's 45 megapixel cameras out. And I have some 20 and 24 megapixel cameras myself, but you know, it held its own. It held its own. Man, I took 5,000, 50,000. I took a lot of pictures with this camera, and well, there's not much to say about this camera except it's old and obsolete. And the 75 to 300, isn't it outstanding lens? No, it's not outstanding. It's not excellent. It's not very good. It's just good. It's more than acceptable. But you're always going to have to take a lot of pictures of the same subject. You know, just hold the shutter button down, go pow, 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 or click them, wait a second and click it like that. And then you'll have to like point your lens slightly to the left, up or down, and see if it'll pick another autofocus spot. And it's the difference of having a lens and not having a lens. Well, the Canon is it's better than not having a lens at all, but it's even better than that. Like other cheap lenses, well, you know, they're just cheap. And you know, it's consistent across the field. There wasn't like sharp in the center and soft on the edges. I seen it take some good pictures, but it always took an acceptable picture or a good picture. And we're going to see that in the following slideshow. So why don't we just jump right into it? And one other thing. That's the purpose of this video, is to allow you to see what you can expect if you took it out in a photo shoot. And you just didn't take 1 or 2 pictures and that was it. You want to take a bunch of pictures. You went to a freaking balloon festival. It costs you $25 to get in. And you want your girlfriend or your family, it's going to cost you more than that. And you want to say, well, is this a lens I want to take somewhere? And it is a lens that you would want to take somewhere. It's not a bad lens. And say you have a girlfriend or a family and your budget is tight and you can't afford like an L lens or some other top of the line thing. And well, for less than $200, I think it was a good value. And I just want to point out one more time that 300 millimeters, if you're taking pictures far off, if the air is turbulent, no matter how good your lens is, you're going to get fuzzy looking pictures from air turbulence. That means the air is wavy and it has heat effects and all other stuff. So you got to look at it like that also. So let's just jump into it, and then, well, you could decide, make up your own mind. Who am I? I'm just presenting this evidence to you, and you can make your own judgments. What can I say? I experimented with the sketch filter, and I also experimented with the oil paint filter to help get some interesting photos of the balloon festival. The lens does have its shortcomings, but it was able to take some good pictures in spite of that. And I also used the sketch filter to maintain people's anonymity. And you know, even though you're at a balloon festival and there's crowds and you have no expectation of privacy, and it is from like 15 years ago, I still did that anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of cool balloons there. You know, I went there with my girlfriend. I had to pay for her admission as well as my own. And we hung out for like hours. Say the balloons take off around sunset. So you get there, I don't know, 6 o'clock. And they had a carnival there and all sorts of food vendors and live music. And then everyone runs over at the balloons when they start to fill them up. And we got pretty close. So I was using 75 millimeters a lot on a crop sensor. That's like, what is that? That's like, I don't know, 110 millimeters on a full frame. And I got all these cool shots. And it's not a bad lens. It's a high definition lens, although it is a little a lowish resolution. And that's, I think, because maybe the autofocus wasn't working exactly right. This is a oil paint filter for this guy, but maybe people would recognize him anyway. And the balloons that take right, they float right over your head, and you could shoot straight up and get a look inside the balloon envelope. And it was just a cool place to be. And if I didn't have this lens, I would have got all these cool pictures. Even though they were 10 megapixel, that was it. That was the maximum megapixel. But for, you know, the parameters of this movie format, 1920 by 1080, that was more than enough. And I could even crop to 1920 by 1080 and like zoom up. So I think they came out really good. It shows you what happens at a balloon festival, what you can expect. There's people milling around, a lot of action, you know, as the balloons fill up and they float away. It's just really cool. And the Canon 75-300 EF f4 to f5.6 doesn't deserve its bad reputation. And I keep saying it over and over again, it's not an excellent, outstanding lens, but it's definitely not a crappy, barely acceptable lens. It's a decent lens. It's good. You know, you'll have to be aware of its shortcomings, and you can shoot around it. And it was a beautiful sunny day, which this lens likes. And I feel I got some great pictures here. And look, I was using all the focal lengths I could get. This zooming it in to get the composition I want. And I noticed that it picks sort of the same number. Like you never get 87, you only get 85. You know, you get like 120, 140. You know, you can't tell what zoom you're on until after you take the picture, you know, and you look at the EXIF data later. But I shot a lot at 75. I shot a whole bunch at 300. I tried to keep everything at f8, but I didn't. Sometimes I was shooting at f5. Here's 155 millimeter f5. Why did I do that? You know, and then you gotta look at the shutter speed. 1/200. That was sort of pushing it. You know, that's the unintentional camera shake territory. 1/500th of a second is better, without a doubt. So I admit that some of the pictures look soft, no matter what. You know, and I did take some pictures, like 3 in a row, to see if the autofocus would kick in. So, like I said, it's not a great lens. It's not a wonderful lens. But if you needed a lens and you're on a budget, you could do a lot worse than the Canon EF 75 to 300. It was lightweight. It was relatively compact. Like I said, the autofocus did work, even though it wasn't exactly precise. I don't know if there's a way to adjust autofocus on the XTi without jumping through hoops. But now, you know, I don't have it to slap it on more modern cameras. So I always think Canon had the best autofocus. I mean, in consumer-grade DSLRs. As I stepped up to more current models, well, I noticed the autofocus seemed to get better too. And I got some really great pictures. Now, you see the gondola is in focus, but the balloon is not. These balloons are far enough away so they're both sort of in focus. But, you know, if you're at 300 millimeters, you know, something is focused at 100 feet, then whatever at 400 feet is going to be out of focus. I mean, the depth of field is that shallow. So you got to keep that in mind. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. But these pictures came out, they're bright, they're colorful, you know, they look sharp. And you could pull, if you had a printer and you want to print out a full-frame borderless picture, 8.5 by 11, you could do it no problem. You could crop it a little bit, you know, and still get a decent picture. If you start pixel peeping, if you want to overcrop it, well, yeah, you're going to see defects in the image, and the autofocus is off. But you know, you got to work around that, unless you want to spend big bucks. Like if you've got a spouse and a couple of kids, and well, you know, you ain't going to go out and spend like $1,500 for some slick lens, and you know, you just got to go with what you could get. Now, vintage lenses, I've seen vintage lenses. Most of them are like, you know, 75 to 200, 45 to 150, and they all work good, you know. But you know, when you start getting to 300, even if you had a 300 millimeter, you would still see these problems. What are the problems you would see? Air turbulence, right? Shallow depth of field. You would still need to stop down to get your best results. It's use a fast shutter speed and a high ISO. You just have to do that. And for the money, I'm saying for the money, so I think I paid like 175 or 180 from B&H over Superstore over in New York City. And that was back in you know, the late 90s, and I thought it was a deal. And I was happy with the lens. But then, you know, I had some extra bucks, and I bought a 400 millimeter Canon L lens, and that thing was fantastic. You know, that was a beautiful lens. There's no getting around it. But, you know, and then I tossed this. You know, I got rid of it, gave it away, sold it or something. And was it a keeper? Well, some people might find it a keeper, definitely, without a doubt, you know. And like I said, I took this camera to the hot air balloon show, and I was happy with the pictures I got. Really happy. You know, and maybe, you know, it's slightly out of focus. I don't have to worry about those people being identified, you know, because it's blurry and it could be anybody with that hairstyle. But like I say, they're very available used. You could probably pick a good copy for under $100. And if you're on a budget and you just want to fool around with it, I say go for it. You could do it. But you have to teach yourself how to use that lens correctly, without a doubt. And there's all sorts of strange people at the show. Check this guy out with his big tat. I couldn't resist taking his picture. I could not.